All right, ladies and gentlemen, reporting to you live from outside of Outlaw Casino here in Atascadero, California. Why we're going through all those details, I don't know. It's the same place we play at every week, so I know you guys already know, but here we are. Feeling really good today. It is the 4th of July tomorrow, so I have it off from work, so there's an extra level of joy and excitement knowing that I don't have to go to work at 7 in the morning the following day and drive over an hour home after the session, so I can just play as long as I want. Take my time, hang out, have fun, not have to force the action or push anything or worry about, getting stuck right before having to get up. So I think it's going to significantly help our mental for tonight. I also have just a little personal stuff. I've been fasting a lot more and trying not to eat as much on the attempt to lose weight. I don't really have time to go to the gym right now, and I've been a little bit overweight, so I feel like that also helps with the mental. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll check in with you guys later.
Alrighty, ladies and gents, getting started with this session. The nip buttons are out, the cards are getting shuffled, the chips are in front of us, and we are ready to play some poker. Nothing too eventful happened. We saw a couple flops and missed. Eventually we were down to about 150 or so in our stack. Looked down at ace 8 suited with the Nick game on. This is a good enough hand for us to just stick it in the middle here. So we end up going all in. I get 2 callers. We're going 3 ways to this flop, which comes deuce, 6, 7 with 2 spades. The low jack goes all in. The high jack calls. There wasn't very much more left behind relative to the rest of the pot. Turn comes a deuce of diamonds, 4 of spades on the river. Aaron Swift flips over ace queen offsuit, and unfortunately that is going to be good, ladies and gentlemen. Now that we've gone bust, I need to pull out some more money. I throw $400 on the table. We exchange these for some beautiful Outlaws chips, and let's see what we can make happen. For this next hand, we'll go through it really quick because there's not really too much to break down. I get dealt 2 black aces pre-flop, open to $30 or so. We end up getting re-raised to 100 and some change. It's most of our stack, but I end up just flatting pre-flop. We get to the flop. I check to the villain because I am out of position. He bets. We go all in. Whether or not he has a hand, we don't have that much more than his bet, so he pretty much has to call with any 2 cards. Bingo, bongo, turn and river. Our opponent has ace king, which is no good against our pocket aces. GG nerds, we double up, let's go. But the glory doesn't last very long. We look down at queen jack suited and open it up pre-flop, get called from the villain involved in the last hand, go to a 10 high flop, and we check it because we are out of position. The opponent bets and I decide to float him 1 time. I turn top pair with a pretty good kicker. I decide to check it over to him once again now that we actually hit a pair, hoping that he continues bluffing at it. He puts in a bet once again and I decide to call once again. River doesn't change the board, so I now take the betting lead. Our opponent thinks about it for quite some time and eventually does put in the call. And instead of taking our opponent to value town, we value owned ourselves because our opponent had king queen. Rather unfortunate. About 30 minutes go by and I realize that everybody at the table has pretty deep stacks and we are pretty short stacked in comparison, so I decide to add on for an additional $500. Hit that like button for some extra run good. Alrighty, getting into the good hands. We are in the small blind when we see an under the gun +1 open to $10. The hijack calls the 10. Action gets back over to us on the small blind. We look down at 2 aces with about 702 in our stack. Going to put in a small raise here to $30. Which honestly, out of position is pretty dangerous. With aces, I probably should have raised it up to $50 or $60 instead, but nothing we can do about it now. The big blind calls, under the gun +1 calls, and the hijack calls. $120 in the middle, and we go to this flop, which comes deuce 5-3 rainbow. Action's back on me, and I decide to continue here for $45. The big blind folds, and then to my surprise, under the gun plus run raises to $125. The hijack gets out of the way, and the action is back on me. Pretty weird spot with aces. I typically wouldn't expect a raise in this spot unless our opponent had a really big hand like a set or potentially a straight. But thinking back to the pre-flop action, we didn't really raise too much. We went from 10 to 30, so our opponent might not be putting us on a big pair like we're currently holding. Could think we have a hand like ace king, and he might be raising here with just a single pair of fives. Maybe even a deuce or a three, who knows? So after I think about it for a bit, I do decide to put in the call. $370 in the middle, and the turn comes the deuce of diamonds. I think over my decision for a little bit here. As I mentioned on the last street, it's very possible that our opponent just has a single pair here, so this pair of deuces shouldn't really change anything. So if we put in a bet here, I don't expect our opponent to fold top pair. I think over our sizing for a little bit and decide to bet $200. Our opponent shouldn't be able to get away from this with top pair, and we won't have too much left in our stack, so our river jam is going to be a very small percentage of the pot. The villain thinks it over for quite some time, but does eventually put in the call, which we'd love to see. 770 in the middle, and the river comes a 7 of diamonds. Doesn't really change the board considering what I have our opponent on, and I doubt that he's going to think this 7 improved our hand. So I end up snap jamming for 347. Under the gun thinks it over for a while and puts in the call. We flip over our hand, and it is good. Get a good sized pot coming in the right direction. Alrighty, moving on to the next hand. We are under the gun and decide to put the $10 straddle on. We see a call by under the gun +1 as well as the low jack. The action gets over to the hijack. He decides to bump up the price of poker to $50. The button and the cutoff both get out of the way, but the small blind does decide to put in the call. Big blind says no thank you. Action's on me, and with 1274 in our stack, looking down at 5-6 of hearts. Typically, I'd like to be in position when playing this hand, but in this particular instance, with the stack depth we currently have, I'm okay seeing a flop with this hand. So we put in the $50, under the gun +1 calls, and the low jack calls as well. Quite the pot brewing already. $200 in the middle, and we go to a flop of 4-3-3 with 1 heart. We flop an open ender with a backdoor flush draw, but at the moment all we have is 6 high, so when the action gets to me, I decide to put in the check. Action checks over to the hijack, who decides to continue betting here for $50. Small blind puts in the call. I put in the call. Under the gun +1 folds, and the low jack folds as well. $350 in the middle, and we get a beautiful turn card. It is the ace of hearts. We now have a flush draw to go along with our open ender. And while I think this is a pretty good card for us to start betting on, I also think this is going to hit the hijack's range a good amount of the time as a pre-flop aggressor. Considering his flop bet was so small, he could have easily just been putting in a small C bet with a hand like ace king. So I decide to check it, hoping that somebody bets, and we go for the juicy check raise. Unfortunately, that is not what happens. The action checks through, and now I am kicking myself for not betting at it on the turn. Could have given ourselves another way of winning this hand, but the dealer instantly bails us out when he throws the 7 of spades on the river. We missed out on a bit of value on the last street, so it's time for us to go for it now. I decide to bet 275, but unfortunately this was a bit too big for either one of our opponents, as they both returned their cards face down to the dealer. For this hand, we are under the gun once again with 5-3 suited, about 1930 in our stack. Not a terrible hand. Definitely don't want to raise, get re-raised, and put in a bunch of money. So we just end up limping the $3, hoping that somebody raises. Everybody's been pretty click happy with the betting, so I don't imagine this is going to limp through. Under the gun +1 limps, the hijack bets $40, the cutoff calls. Big blind calls, and when it gets on me, I'm obviously going to put in the call, hoping that under the gun +1 does not raise, which luckily he does not. $200 in the middle, and the board comes out 9-7 king with 2 spades. Once again, a phenomenal flop. We have a 5 high flush draw. Not the best flush draw, but a flush draw nonetheless. Action checks to me, and I go ahead and check it back. I was expecting somebody to take a stab at a king high board, but it's apparent that nobody has a king because the action checked all the way around. The turn is the 6 of clubs. Fantastic card, because now we have a gut shot to go along with our spade draw. But I don't really want to take the betting lead when we are out of position, so I go ahead and check this. The hijack now decides that he likes his hand once again and decides to bet $85. folds over to me and I put in the call. We go heads up to this river with 370 in the middle, and it comes the 4 of hearts, which honestly, between the spades getting there and the straight getting there, I think the straight is much more disguised. So once again, we are going to go for some value. I decide to bet $225 and the hijack goes into the tank. He thinks this decision over for quite some time, but after he's given it some thorough analysis, he does inevitably put in the call. We flip over our hand. Our opponent says nice hand, gives the table an old tap, and we have yet another pot coming in our direction. Our opponent didn't show his hand, but he did tell us later in the night that he called us very, very light in this spot with just ace high. Definitely capable of bluffing with a brick draw, but we just happen to have the goods this time. It is now getting past 1 a.m. and the poker play is getting a bit out of line. Everybody seems to be 3-bet happy and very bluff happy, which is dangerous because the stacks are getting deep. We're in the low jack and we see an open from under the gun +1 to $15. I'm sitting on ace of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, and I decide to put in the call. The hijack calls and then the button raises to $65. Under the gun +1 folds. I decide to put in the call and the hijack puts in the call as well. 214 in the middle and the flop comes 10, 8, 10 rainbow. Not really much going on this flop. We have a backdoor flush draw and a backdoor straight draw on a paired board, which is not great. Action checks over to the button, who decides to bet $60 here. Now at this point, I've already noticed that the button has been raising pre-flop almost every hand he decides to play. He's been involved in like 90% of hands and he c-bets almost every single flop he's involved in. So I thought it was time to take a stand and put in the old-fashioned check raise. I bump it up to $145. The hijack folds. The button tanks for quite a while, but ends up putting in the call. 504 in the middle, hoping to pick up a 7, a jack, or any diamond to continue blasting on. And unfortunately, we get none of those options. We get just about the worst card in the deck. We get the 10 of clubs. If we had a 10, this would be a great card because it would be much less believable that we have it once 3 are on the board. But unfortunately, we don't. And to make matters worse, if our opponent had any pocket pair or just a pair of 8s here, I highly doubt he is folding now. So unfortunately, considering who our opponent is in this hand and the unlikelihood of him actually folding on this card, I decide to just wave the white flag and give up here. The button bets an insulting $100, which I initially took as a sign of weakness and did contemplate putting in a check raise once again, but I determined that it is most likely just lighting money on fire. So I rather not sit here and try to draw to either a 9 or an ace and live to fight another day. It's now past 2 a.m. and our stack is taking a bit of a beating. Every pre-flop raise is between $40 to $60, so calling 2 or 3 flops and missing sets you back about $120 to $160 or so. For this one, we are in the small blind with about $14.80 in our stack. We look down at 2 deuces and see a limp from the hijack. The button bets to $15. I'm obviously going to put in the call here with a pocket pair. And as expected, we do see a 3-bet by the big blind to $35. Hijack puts in the call, button comes along for the ride, and of course I am going nowhere. $140 in the middle and the flop comes out king, jack, deuce with 2 diamonds. We flop bottom set, but we are out of position, so I decide to put in the check and let our opponents put in the money for us. The big blind does not disappoint with a continuation bet at $35. The hijack puts in the call, gets over to the button, who now folds. And now that it's back on me, this board is far too wet. There's a straight draw and a flush draw out there, and I don't want to give either of our opponents any cards for free. So we're gonna put in a raise now. I bump up the price of poker to $140. Big blind doesn't take too long before putting in the call. Hijack goes into the tank for quite a bit of time, but inevitably calls as well. $560 now in the middle, and the turn comes the ace of clubs. One of the 2 draws did get there, but I can't be afraid of monsters under the bed. It's very possible that our opponents just have a single pair here, or if we're lucky, still on the diamond draw. So I'm not gonna let my foot off the gas just quite yet. I decide to bet $300, hoping not to see an all-in from either one of our opponents. Big blind quickly releases and the hijack goes into the tank. If he's tanking, he obviously does not have a straight, so I think that we are good here with our set. Eventually, he says that he knows we are ahead, but he's got a ton of outs. which I am absolutely happy to hear. This is best case scenario. I want our opponent to call and hopefully have his draw get there, but pair the board. Jack of diamonds would be phenomenal, maybe even an ace of diamonds. And if the draw gets there, we can easily just release our hand. But as expected, once our opponent let us know that he was on a draw, I don't think it's wise for him to continue because he basically announced his hand. He inevitably does let it go and says he does not want to gamble. Couldn't pick up any more, but we did make a good amount in this hand. All right, strap in, ladies and gentlemen. This one is a juicy one. We got 3-4 suited on the button with 1790-ish in the stack. Action folds over to us, and we're gonna go ahead and put in a small open here to $15, assuming somebody's going to raise, so I don't want to make it too big. The small blind calls, and then here comes the big blind, putting chips in the middle. Makes it $50 to go. I'm obviously going nowhere with suited connectors in position, and then the small blind puts in the call as well. $150 in the middle. The flop comes out ace, deuce, jack, rainbow. Don't really have much here besides a gut shot. Small blind checks, and then the big blind decides to bet $45. As I mentioned earlier, this particular opponent keeps c-betting any flop that he opens pre, so I'm not quite convinced that he even has a pair yet. So we're going to put in the call, hoping to either hit a 3, a 4, a 5, or pick up another spade for some additional equity. Small blind calls as well, which I don't love to see, but I honestly expected. 285 as we go to this turn, and we get the best possible card in the deck, the 5 of spades. We have the nut straight right now with an open-ended straight flush redraw. Small blind checks, and the big blind decides to continue for $145 here. Now I actually believe that our opponent has a decent hand. I don't expect him to use this sizing unless he has something pretty good. At least 2 pair or better, so I think we got extremely lucky hitting this turn. I really want to put in a raise now and start piling chips in the middle, considering that we have the nuts right now with another really good draw. But the player in the middle is a calling station, and I don't want to scare him out of the pot just yet. So after thinking for a bit, I do just put in the call, hoping that the small blind comes along for the ride. But unfortunately he folds, and now I'm kicking myself for not raising. 575 in the middle, and the river comes the 8 of spades. The big blind tanks for quite some time. The action's on him, and I'm not sure why he's tanking for so long. While he's in the tank, I'm sitting here questioning what hand he has. He's acting like he has a monster and like he needs to figure out the correct bet sizing here to get the maximum amount of value. And considering we had the nut straight on the turn, then we rivered a flush, I'm not really sure what hand he would be doing this with. So as he's thinking over his decision, I start to question whether or not when he sized up on the turn, he was sizing up with a flush draw. And he just absolutely nailed it on the river. And if that isn't the case and he didn't hit a flush on the river, then I think he might just blast off here with complete air. So after thinking about it for quite some time, our opponent decided to bet $375. I had already talked myself into just putting in a call if our opponent fired anything more than half pot. So when he puts the bet out, I just throw a chip in the middle to put in the call. And our opponent announces that he has a straight. What? Our opponent flips over 3-4 offsuit, and our flush is good. Gotta hand it to my man. He bumped it up to $50 in the big blind with 3-4 offsuit. C-bet the flop with just a gutter and absolutely smashed the turn. Granted, we had the same hand, but never in my life would I have put this man on this hand, especially when we're holding it. Had I known, I obviously would have gone for some thicker value. I had a feeling that he had a pretty strong hand, but considering that there was no straights possible besides the straight that I was holding, it was very hard for me to put him on that hand. If he wasn't playing so many hands, I could have given him a bit more credit and put some sets or 2 pairs in his range, but given how many hands he's playing, I found it unlikely that he would have aces or jacks. I can't help but feeling like we misplayed this hand, and I'm feeling a bit weird about it. Definitely left a lot of money on the table. Should have followed my instincts and check raised the turn and then gone for a good either 3/4 or pot size bet on the river. We're about 9 hours into the session at this point, and I feel like our play is starting to become a bit questionable, but we have the day off tomorrow, so we're not going anywhere just quite yet. And all things considered, we did win that hand and have a massive amount of chips now, so we can't complain too much. All right, this next one is a doozy. We are in the small blind with 2450 in our stack when we look down at two red aces. The night of aces today. There's a $6 under the gun straddle and everybody limps it. So when the action gets back over to me in the small blind, I'm going to bump up the price of poker to $40 here. And looking back on it now, I realistically could have gone a lot bigger. People were opening to $40, $50 with garbage. So with aces, I probably should have made it 60 to 75 at least, especially considering we're out of position to thin out the field a little bit, but we're neither here nor there. Pretty stupid. We're playing really late, not playing their best poker. Anyhow, I make it 40. The big blind calls, the hijack calls, and the button calls. 172 in the middle, and the flop comes 4-8-3 all clubs. We do not have a club in our hand, so we have to tread cautiously here. I decide to check. The big blind bets $60. Low jack calls $60. Button gets out of the way, and when it gets over to me, I know we're involved with the two wild cards at the table. One of them more of a thinking wild card, if that makes any sense, but wild cards nonetheless. They're ready to get in there and tussle. If either of them hit the board, I'd expect them to bet and or call here. If either of them have a club in their hand that is jack or better, I expect them to call here as well. So not quite ready to give up yet. I put in the call and we go three ways to this turn. 352 in the middle and the king of hearts peels off. Doesn't change too much on this board. Flush is still there, but now a king has top pair. I check once again, and now the big blind continues for $75. Still think I might be good here, but when the hijack raises it to 225, I am now in a pickle. I'm expecting one or two things here. Either our opponent turned top pair with a combo draw with maybe a hand like king queen or king jack, maybe even king 10 holding the king of clubs. So he's raising with the second nut flush draw, or he has a small flush already and is trying to protect it, not let a fourth club peel off and give an ace, a king, or a queen of clubs a higher flush. This is a bit tricky because our opponent bet about half of his remaining stack. So if we call this turn bet, we have to call his jam on the river unless we get bailed out by a fourth club. I go back and forth in my head for quite a while, deciding if he actually has the made flush or if our opponent is capable of bluffing in this spot. I've played with Nate the Great once before, but it was for a very short period and he came in very short stacked looking for a double up. So he seemed like the type that was willing to gamble, but this time we were playing much deeper than the previous, so I'm not quite sure. Most of the time I would not think that this is a bluff, but considering the hands I've seen him push with before and what he likes to come in and tussle with, at the time I was 50-50 on whether or not this was a value raise or a semi bluff. So I ended up putting the chips in the middle, praying to not see another club on the river. Big blind gets out of the way, so we go heads up to the river with 877 in the middle, and it comes the 7 of diamonds. I check. Nate goes all in for 232. Obviously can't fold. And my man has jack 5 suited for the flopped flush. Very, very unfortunate. Looking back at it now, I think we made a couple mistakes in this hand. Definitely should have raised a bit bigger pre-flop. I'm okay check calling the flop, but then after seeing the bet 3-bet on the turn, I think it was definitely time to release the aces unless we had the ace of clubs. Oh well, not much we can do about it now. Just gotta live and learn. Nice hand to you, Mr. Nate. Alrighty, brushing that last hand off, we are now on the button and we look down at king 8 of diamonds. We see a limp from the low jack, limp from the hijack. Action gets to me and I'm going to put in a small raise here. If nobody's doing the betting themselves, our hand must be good. Small blind immediately raises up to 45 and I am going nowhere. We're going to go ahead and put in the call. This particular individual likes to raise very wide. $96 in the middle. The board runs out jack, king, queen, rainbow. We have top pair with a backdoor flush draw. So when the small blind bets $50, I am going nowhere here. I call 196 in the middle and we're off to the turn, which comes the 10 of clubs. Not the card we wanted to see. There are now 4 to a straight out there, so any 9 or any ace make a straight. But the small blind for some reason decides to continue here for $50. Can't imagine he has anything all that impressive if he's just going 45, 50, 50 here. Think it's worth calling one more time. So we do put in the call. 296 now in the middle, and the river comes the jack of hearts. Small blind ends up jamming for 270. And at this point, I do not think it is a bluff anymore. If he was blasting with just ace high on the flop, He got there on the turn. There's a bunch of 2-pair combinations like king, queen, king 10, queen 10. Any jack obviously has trips now, and he could easily have a full house with queen jack or jack 10. The repeated small bet sizing kept me in here up until this point. Against any other player, I would have just folded the flop, to be honest, but against this particular individual who likes to blast off, I thought top pair was still okay to call with, but at this point it is a clear cut fold. But for whatever reason, whether it be fatigue or being steamed from the previous hand, I was not able to make the disciplined fold here, and we put in the call. Our opponent showed us pocket 10s, 4 turn trips, and a rivered full house. So our single pair here is no good. Really wish I would have just let this one go, but we gotta keep moving forward with what we got. And now the tilt is settling in thoroughly. We look down at queen jack offsuit in the hijack with about 1445 in our stack and decide to open it. Cutoff calls, button calls, small blind calls, and the big blind calls. Going 5 ways to this flop with $45 in the middle, and we get a pretty favorable one. It's 8-3 queen with 2 clubs. We have top pair with a reasonable kicker, so I decide to continue betting here for $30. Cutoff folds, button folds, small blind calls, and the big blind folds. 105 in the middle, and the turn comes the jack of hearts. Phenomenal card for us. Those straights end up getting there. Well, 9-10 gets there, but that would have been a gut shot on the flop. But now we have top 2. So if there was any chance that we were outkicked with our queen, we now improved to top 2. Gonna size up a little bit, but this pot's relatively small as it is, so I decided to go $65. Only the small blind calls, and we go off to the river with 235 in the middle, and it comes an atrocious 10 of clubs. To make things even worse, or potentially better, the small blind now leads for $150. I was most likely going to check back this river regardless because the front door club draw gets there, and considering we're holding a queen and a jack, I highly doubt that our opponent is taking this line with a pair of 8s. There's also a 4-liner to a straight out there, so our hand for all intents and purposes is just a bluff catcher here. I am super steamed and really tilted, but I've already made a couple of stupid calls the last couple hands, so when we're in this spot, I don't want to make my 3rd dumb call of the night, so I do actually end up folding this time. Getting very annoyed at this point. It is now 3 in the morning, and it seems like our stack is just downtrending, getting very close to even for what we originally bought into for the night. So I should, for all intents and purposes, just get up now since the tilt is setting in thick. But of course, like many other poker players, I have convinced myself that we can get the money back and leave with a good sized profit. And a quick update for you guys before we move into this next hand, because obviously my stack is significantly smaller than the last time you saw it. Our camera died and our backup battery died, so I had to try to charge the backup battery off to the side, and we continued playing, so I wasn't able to capture a good amount of footage between 3 a.m. to 4:30 in the morning, which it is now currently. Very unfortunate. A lot of the same of what was happening before, just, you know, spots where we should have folded. Couldn't really find the fold. I know I folded the very last hand that you guys saw, but that was the smallest pot where we actually made a disciplined fold. Fatigue was settling in, tilt definitely wasn't helping, and obviously now we are down to crumbs. We have a little over 600 in our stack. We look down at 9-7 offsuit. There's a pre-flop raise. We ended up making a loose call here. Flop middle pair, flop checks through, so I didn't put anybody on the king. The turn was an 8 of hearts. So I decided to bet with our second pair and an open ender, thinking we'd be good here. Got called in one spot. The river was a 10 of hearts, so we made our straight. Bet a third of the pot and got raised for a little under pot, and could not figure out what our opponent could possibly have here that we're behind. But I didn't think that he was raising here thin, so it was either a missed flush or nothing. Ended up putting in the call, and our opponent hit a gut shot on the river. He had queen jack offsuit. Rather unfortunate. If it was queen jack of diamonds, it would have made a little bit more sense, but queen jack off, so just a straight butt gutter ball that we got floated with on the turn, and he absolutely drilled it. Gonna speed through this one pretty quickly as well. We're in the small blind with jack 9 suited. Under the gun bets 18. Couple people end up calling, myself included. We see a raise to 50. Everybody calls the 50, so we're priced in to call again pre-flop. 250 going into the middle already, and the flop came out 8-3-6 with 2 clubs. So we have the club draw. I decided to take the betting lead here for $25. Got a couple callers. We were just trying to build this pot, but also see a cheap turn. Hopefully we just drill our flush draw. Fortunately, we do not get the card that we needed. We see a 3 of diamonds on the turn. At this point, there's enough money in this pot to just go for it. We still just have a flush draw, but I end up jamming here for 194. I get called and then the button rejams for a little bit more. So there's a side pot going. We break out on the river with the 9 of diamonds, and then we see Nate the Great with 5 deuce of diamonds, and Kev Dog shows a 3 for turn trips, and unfortunately we ended up with just jack high here. But we somehow built this pot up to almost $1,000, and we only had 250 in our stack. So had we actually hit here, we would have gotten a quadruple up. We might have been able to just shove the flop and get it through, but we would have made significantly less. So I'm actually very okay with the way that we played this. We're very stuck at this point, and we need to try to make as much money as possible when given the opportunity. Fortunately, it did not happen. Alrighty, and after that last hand, ladies and gentlemen, we ended up rebuying for 2K. Probably not the smartest decision considering how late it is, especially since it is getting into the very early hours of the morning. It is now 5:30. Already dusted 500 of it, so we're at 1510 at the moment in our stack, more or less. We see an under the gun straddle 2-6. Cutoff bets $20. Small blind calls, and I am in the big blind with 2 aces. Pretty strong hand here. Gonna put in a raise to $60. Once again, it seems like my opening sizes are just a bit off. With a $20 bet and a call in the middle, we can definitely go anywhere between 120 to I think 140 here. Trying to thin out the field, get some of the players out, considering how wide people have been calling tonight. But once again, can't do anything about it now. Situation is what it is. So we make it $60. Under the gun folds, the cutoff calls, and the small blind folds. Go into this flop of Jack 10 King with 2 clubs, $140 in the pot. Not the best flop for us. There's a lot of 2 pair combinations. Ace Queen made a straight, but there could be a ton of single pair holdings in there as well. So I decide to continue here for $60, and the cutoff just calls. 260 in the middle, and the turn comes the 7 of hearts. I bet 125, and the cutoff jams for 438. I tank for quite some time, wondering what our opponent could be jamming here with, and frankly, I am not too sure. King 10, King Jack probably. I don't think Ace Queen would go all in here. I'm representing a lot of strength, so if he had the nuts, he would probably just flat and let me bet again on the river since he is in position. Worst case scenario, I don't bet and he bets. So it seemed like he was trying to protect his hand to some sort of degree. And then at this point, I started convincing myself that our opponent could have a hand like King Queen, Queen 10, Queen Jack, maybe just 2 clubs in his hand, and he's trying to take the pot down now with just a draw, potentially a single pair plus draw. And eventually, because I am undisciplined tonight and not playing as well as I should, I end up sticking the money in. 1136 in the middle, and the river comes the 7 of clubs, which I think is a phenomenal card because it could have just bailed us out if our opponent did have 2 pair, but unfortunately that's not the case. The villain has pocket 10s. Sucks to suck, and at this point we didn't really play too many hands after this. The game broke about 30 minutes later, and that was all she wrote for tonight. Let's cut over to the outro.
All right, everybody, some end of vlog closing thoughts for you. So I'll try to keep this brief. Hello, Ari, say hi to the viewers. Oh, before we get into that though, we have a new family member. Her name is Ruby. Oh, you cheesing. Oh, you cheesing. You like the camera, don't you? So as far as this session, it went really well at the beginning. We're having a great time. It was kind of dead at the very start of the session, to be honest. It was kind of slow. We barely had one table going, but then action and, the game picked up a little bit. So people came in later in the night. Pots got pretty big. People were playing a lot of hands and 3-betting really wide. So action was kind of crazy for a while. We were able to run up our stack very, very high after a while. And, because we wanted to play long, because we didn't have work the following day, we ended up staying until the early morning hours, and then around 2 or 3 a.m. the fatigue started to set in. Played some pretty big hands. I think the aces hand that initially took a chunk out of our stack was pretty 50-50 in the sense of either call or folding. The opponent was very capable of taking that line, but I think given how the action went, especially now watching it back, it was a fold. It was a pretty clear cut fold. He already had the flush. Just flatting the flop and then, you know, raising the turn. It's rarely going to be a bluff three ways. I think I could have laid it down there. I think calling the flop was fine. I mean, I already knew I might have been in trouble, right? We checked the flop, check called the flop, and then check called the turn. I think the check call on the turn is where we screwed up. And then after that hand, I got to my head a little bit, got very annoyed. I was, you know, chasing, what do they call it? I was up stuck, right? Like you're up, but you're stuck because you lost a big hand and you're trying to, you know, get it back. So I think I was chasing that. There were plenty of times where I sat there and I was like, man, I'm getting tired. I'm playing a little questionable right now. I should probably get up and leave. Didn't get up and leave. And that's when we went from being up, you know, 1,000 to 1,500 to being even, to losing our initial buy-in, to adding on an additional 2,000, to losing an additional, you know, $500, $600, $700 on top of that. So instead of leaving up with a significant profit, we ended up leaving down over 2,000. So very, very good example of knowing your limits, not overstaying, and getting up once you start making some questionable plays on the table. I was very stubborn about wanting to come and play as long as I could because I had the following day off. It was just poor decision after poor decision after poor decision. I definitely realized a couple of things about myself as a poker player and followed some holes in not my game, but like my mental and why I get into these situations. I feel like it's mostly ego. I won't get too far into the details, but I'm gonna make some adjustments. We'll see how the next couple of weeks go after this. I mean, we've been doing okay. Last couple sessions were good. This one, not so great. Moving forward, I feel like the sessions are going to be a lot better in regards to me not making really stupid decisions if I can implement this fix that I think I found. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, checking out the channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't already, go follow us on Instagram. Merch should be coming out in the near future, but we're still finalizing the new logo and designs. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for stopping by again. Good luck on the fail, and I will catch you all next time. Peace.